Trying out a new angle. Kind of like it so far. See what happens. But today we're featuring Jim Croce. You Don't Mess Around with Jim album. One of my first vinyls. If you don't know who this guy is, definitely check him out. And for today, we are going to be talking about Notes from the Underground. Got this copy for like $1, I think. But this is actually the book that made me realize I wanted to start doing videos because I liked it so much, and there was just so much I wanted to talk about. And it's just it's a pretty short. It's a short one, so it's like 140 pages, 153. So most people can finish it in a day. It takes me about 2 or 3 though for me. But yeah, so I think this is the first Russian literature book I've ever read. First Russian author, I believe. Dostoevsky. And I have Lolita with Nabokov soon. And I'll eventually get to Tolstoy. I think there's The Death of Ivan Lynch by Tolstoy is one of his shorter ones, so I'll probably read that soon. I've been getting more into shorter books lately. So about Dostoevsky, Notes from the Underground. He, was born in 1821, died in 1881. In the middle of the 1800s, lived to be about 60. He lived in Petersburg, Russia. He produced the first Russian social novel with his first novel at the age of 24 called Poor People. He also wrote The Idiot, which I plan on reading, and Crime and Punishment, which I already have, which I plan on reading, and The Brothers Karamazov, which I just started pronouncing or saying correctly. I have that as well, but that'll probably be a while since it's so long. I did find the audiobook on YouTube, so that'll definitely help. An interesting thing about Dostoevsky, in 1849, he was sentenced, I believe because of his writing, to the Siberian prison for 8 years. So for 8 years he lived in prison doing probably the hardest manual labor you can do in Siberia, which is mind-blowing. So, I'm sure he has some things to say. But, my likes and dislikes about this. So this was really the first stream of consciousness book that I really enjoyed. What the book I was trying to think of last video, The Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, I think that was like really my first stream of consciousness book that I read. It took some getting through, especially towards like the 3/4 mark of me pushing through, and then as I Lay Dying was also another struggle of stream of consciousness. But this one, I didn't have really any problems with it. I didn't want to put it down. I didn't really need to take any breaks. I just wanted to keep on going. And I really did like that of it. Another likes of it is the reality of paradoxes we have in our lives, and just not understanding himself as a person, and just kind of the mental thought loops people go through. It's probably the first time someone had ever really it's not the first stream of consciousness book, but it was definitely one of the first, and no one really had written like that before. And probably my only dislike is that the protagonist isn't necessarily likable, but that's kind of the point of him. He's considered the first anti-hero ever written, and so you're not necessarily supposed to like him, but you do like him at the same time, and you want to know what happens to him, even though he's not the best person. A lot of gray. It kind of reminded me a lot of Bukowski type of personality. What else? And the Underground, just from the title, Notes from the Underground. What does that mean? Underground could be so many different things, but what it comes to mean is underground, as in like your psyche, as in what you're thinking that no one else knows, like such personal thoughts and the way the mind works that no one really had written like the mind works. You're just writing and editing and like finding out the best way to write something, but he was really writing just like how we think as human beings. Um, some big themes in this is personal suffering, having a tortured mind, the descent into madness, which is one of my favorite themes, um, possessed with ideas that distort life and consciousness. Um, I wrote something down that I don't know what I was meaning by. And one of the descriptions of this book that I wrote down, I don't know where it's from or what, called Notes from the Underground, The Impassioned Confessions of a Solitary Man. That might just be... Oh, yeah, it's on the book. That's where I got it from. Right there. So yeah, that's just a little idea of what you're getting into, because what I found with literature, it's nice to have some context and not just dive in it without any preparation. So a couple of quotes I want to read for you. Page 44. Let's see. In every man's memory there are things he won't reveal to others, except perhaps to friends, and there are things he won't reveal even to friends, only perhaps to himself, and then too in secret. And finally there are things he is afraid to reveal even to himself, and every decent man has quite an accumulation of them. In fact, the more decent the man, the more of them he has stored up. At any rate, I have myself only recently gotten up the courage to recall some of my former adventures, which up until now I have always skirted, indeed with a kind of anxiety. But now, precisely now, when I have not only recalled them but have decided to write them down, I want to test whether it's possible to be entirely frank at least with oneself and dare to face the whole truth. Incidentally, Hines says that true autobiographies are almost impossible. A man is sure to lie about himself. He is certain, for example, that Rousseau had lied about himself in his confessions, had lied, in fact, deliberately, out of vanity. So I feel like that quote gives a good idea of like the voice and the type of novel this is, and just the type of thoughts he's going through. And I didn't write this down, but one of my also likes is that the atmosphere of this book is kind of like, feels like you're living in like a smoky dream or like a smoky memory where things aren't really necessarily concrete. You're just kind of going from one memory to another, and you don't really, you kind of have to figure out if this is like before or after, or like how it kind of works. But I really like that. It was like experiencing someone else's memories. Another quote, 82. No, I passionately long to prove to all that trash. No, I passionately long to prove that all that trash, that I was in no way the coward I imagined myself to be, that wasn't it at all. In the most violent paroxysm of cowardly fever, I dreamed of winning the upper hand, of conquering, of carrying them away, of forcing them to love me, if only for my nobility of mind and unquestionable wit. They would abandon Zherkov, he would sit at the side silent and shamed, and I would crush him. Afterwards I would perhaps make peace with him and drink to our friendship, but the most cruel and humiliating thing for me was that I knew even then, surely and completely, that I really needed none of this at all, that in truth I had no desire whatever to crush them or win them over or attract them, and that, even had I achieved this, I'd be the first to say it wasn't worth a straw. But oh, how I prayed to God to be the day. Oh, I prayed to God for the day to be over. With an inexpressible anguish, I kept going to the window, opening the transom, and peering into the grayish murk of densely falling wet snow. Jesus. If I could read. Sorry for that butcher. But moving on, one last quote. If you're still watching, 141. Our silent our silence lasted about 5 minutes. The tea stood on the table. We did not touch it. I was so angry, that I deliberately refrained from starting first, to make it still more difficult for her, and it was too awkward for her to begin herself. She glanced at me several times in sad perplexity. I remained obstinately silent. I was, of course, the chief sufferer, because I was aware of the revolting meanness of my vicious stupidity, yet I could not control myself. That was one of those quotes that I really related to, just because of stubbornness and pride, and not wanting to be the first to talk sometimes. So I really connected with it. But yeah, so the short of it all, definitely go check out this book. I love it. I'm super into Russian literature now, and it's got me. It's hit a spark, and I definitely want to read more. And he's for sure one of my favorite writers. So go check him out. Hopefully, I'll be doing Crime and Punishment here soon. Peace.